Good afternoon and welcome to Design Master Training. My name is David Robison. Today we are going to be looking at changes in Beta 8 for our beta software that we've got that's being released. If you're attending the training live, you can ask questions in the chat box. If you're watching the recording of the training, you can call or email your questions. Our phone number is 866-516-9497 and our email address is support@designmaster.biz. So we did beta 7 back in November. And the beta with the new software has the one-line diagrams in Revit is kind of the main feature. We had gotten some feedback over the months about what could be changed. And so we've spent, since November, putting together beta 8 with all of the feedback. So it's not really bug fixes as opposed to actually a bunch of new features to address the little pieces that weren't quite right yet in terms of having a functional one-line diagram. And there were enough of them that I thought it would be good to spend this training taking a look at the changes that we implemented. The first thing that we did is that we formalized the graphic that we're using for overcurrent protection. Previously, when you put in a feeder, it would put in this graphic here, so you would get an overcurrent protection. But the software didn't really have any concept that that was the graphic that we were using to represent the overcurrent protection. So then if you needed to go change something or anything like that, the software didn't really help you with that at all. So what we did, if I edit this panel and pull up the panel edit command, we added in the one-line diagram section, we've got the default downstream overcurrent protection. That existed before. And that's what we use to choose that first graphic. We also have the upstream overcurrent protection graphic for each piece of equipment. And so this is the graphic that's going to be used. And if you change it here, it's actually going to change on the one-line diagram. And there's kind of a little hierarchy in terms of what it uses. So the default for the upstream is we'll just use whatever the upstream thing says to use. And that upstream thing will have a default downstream. And that will also have then a default which points back to options. So it kind of finds the first place that it's set and it uses that. So we're looking at MDP1 here. It's got this breaker. If we change it from the default, we can put a fused switch in there and it will actually go in and see that that graphic changed and it will swap out this graphic for us. In the same way, if we actually change it here using our add modify graphic command, I select this graphic. It's going to ask us some options. We'll go over a bunch of these. But right now it's saying, hey, this is the overcurrent protection graphic. Are you intending to replace it? We'll say, yeah, I want to replace that. And I'm going to use a breaker, and we'll use the double drawout. It'll change the graphic. And then if we go and edit the panel, you'll see that it also has updated the value here. So what is displayed here is what will always end up displayed on the one-line diagram. For the most part, we keep them in sync automatically. If they ever do get out of sync when you run a calculate whole project, that will get updated with the correct breaker graphic. So there is a chance that when you run the update, the calculate, it'll update those values. So that's the first thing we did for our graphics. The second thing we did that you can see is that we added feeder IDs. This is a feature that wasn't ready when we first released we knew that we needed to have it, we just weren't done. But we got that finished out so that the feeder IDs are generated based upon the wire callouts and then all of the graphical support to get the ID on the one-line diagram. So in the same way as the overcurrent protection graphic, we also have the feeder ID graphic set for the equipment. So that's in the one-line diagram. You've got your feeder ID graphic, and you can pull the default or you can specify a specific value. We are shipping by default with a hexagon, an oval, and a rectangle. That kind of covers probably 90% of what people use. You can obviously customize that to have a different graphic if you wanted to. But out of the box, those are the three that we're just kind of including, hoping that one of those will make most people happy. If I change it to an oval, you'll see that it'll change this hexagon here to an oval. If we go to our options, there are a number of options related to feeder IDs. The first is to include it, yes or no. So by default, they're going to get included on your existing projects. They'll get included and they'll get added. It will make your existing projects possibly a little messy. So for a project that you've got going on where you've done the labeling a different way, you can just come here, you can set this to no. It won't change anything immediately, but when you run the calculate, it'll go through, say, hey, it's been set to no, we're not going to display the IDs anymore, and it'll take them all off. So if you've got projects that you've worked on previously, you can set that to no, and it'll get rid of them all. By default, we did set it to yes, just so that everyone saw that it was there, and then you could decide if you wanted to keep it or not. We automatically generate the feeder IDs. We have 3 different options. You can do a short ID, where the idea is to keep the ID as compact as possible. So we have a little format for that. You can do a longer ID where you have more information on the ID. You can also just do sequential, where you number them 1 to whatever, and then they're just given individual numbers. We have a knowledge base article that describes the different formats if you want to see how those work, and that's linked from the beta update page. We have the option to automatically create them or not. By default, it's creating them. You can say no, and then when it needs a new one, it'll ask you, here's the wire callout, what should the ID be? And then we have options to load these to and from the master schedule. So you can have a master list of IDs for your company, so that if you have a consistent format that you want to have across all of your projects, all of the callouts of the same type will use the exact same ID. And then these other ones are related to the feeder ID schedule, which didn't actually make it into beta 8, but beta 9, which I'm going to release tomorrow morning, has a feeder ID schedule. So the schedule insert, which is not in beta 8, it will be in beta 9, again, coming out tomorrow. You give it a point, and it will draw a feeder schedule for you. So basically, it's going to show you the graphic and then what the corresponding wire callout is for that graphic. So these are just standard Revit families. There's nothing too terribly special about them, but we did define them so that they work nicely as feeder IDs. By default, they have a width of 1. You can come here and you can actually change this width. So if you want them smaller or wider, you can adjust them. And so that's built into the family, so you can adjust that. You can make them smaller if you want to. Mostly the idea was that if you have long IDs that need a wider box, that way you can make them wider more easily. And then they've got the grip, so you can move the ID up and down on the segment, same as you can the overcurrent protection. So that's nothing all that special to Design Master. That's just standard family and annotation customization in Revit. We also updated a lot of the customization in this release so that everything now has an existing checkbox, and that just gives you a lighter line weight for things. For the feeders, that's actually just for the ID or for the overcurrent protection. So to make the overcurrent protection or the ID existing, which is a lighter line weight. The segment itself is controlled by the type. So we can go from medium solid to, say, a light dashed line, and that'll make the line lighter and dashed. So this is just graphical, really. So out of the box, this is how our graphics work. You can customize this to however you want it to be, do as much work as you want with your families in Revit to make it work for your workflow. But this is just so that out of the box, it's reasonably usable graphics. Previously, and particularly this is for the like for this panel here, we can set it to existing. Previously, we actually had separate families for the new and existing, and that was a little cumbersome. So now you just check a box and it'll swap the line type for you. We have 2 commands to help with the graphics as well. The feeder phase. So now when you select the feeder, you can swap the segment type that's being used. So that if you want to change all of these feeders to be something, if you want to have them all be light dashed, it'll change everything on that feeder for you. For the panels and for the graphics, we added a new command called the add modify graphic command. That's here. You can run that. You can select a feeder graphic, and it will either add a graphic or modify what's there. So that's how I changed. We were changing this overcurrent protection, so I can choose that. So you can replace the existing, set it back to a circuit breaker. If it's on just a regular segment, it'll just prompt you for what it should be. So if I want to put a meter in there, I can just add a meter to that segment, and it'll put it in. One thing we did change, I need a good example here for it. I'm going to move this down and reset that feeder so it's a little bit longer. Previously, if you wanted to add a graphic here, you would have to break this and kind of add some more segments, and it was a little bit cumbersome to do. Now, when you run the add graphic, it'll ask you, hey, do you want to replace what's there or add another graphic to that segment? You can say, I'm adding a graphic. I want to add a meter, and it'll do the break and add the additional graphic for you. So we cleaned up that workflow because a lot of people were having trouble with it. It was awkward. This is much better. You can also use it on the equipment itself. I want to change the switchboard, so I can take the switchboard. I drew it in as just a basic panel. If we want to have a little bit more switchboard looking, we can select it. And so now you can choose a new graphic. I'm going to do a horizontal switchboard fed from the top. It'll replace it. It'll give you an option, hey, what do you want to do with the labels? Do you want to leave them as they are, or do you want to update them to kind of what the defaults are for that graphic? I'll update them. But that way you can take something that's already in your drawing or in your drafting view and swap it out for something else a little more easily. We added a new command that I'm going to show you, which is called the change link command. What this will do is it will allow you to point something that's already on the model here, or on the drafting view, to something different in the model. So for example, we could take this LP2, we could do change link, select it, and point it to something different. Say I want this to actually be LP2B. Select that. It'll just point it to that other thing in the model and just replace everything and kind of have it all work for that other thing in the model. You can also copy things in Revit. So if I run the Revit copy command and select this piece here, I can make a copy of it. If we run the calculate, since this is a copy, it's going to put a bunch of question marks in there saying this was copied, so it's not linked to anything anymore, because this is the one that points to MDP2. This thing points to we don't know. We keep the name on there so you kind of remember where it came from, but it's saying I don't know what this should point to. So now we can run the copy link or the change link command, select that, and point it to something different. So I can point that to MDP3. And that way, if you'd made some changes to it, if you'd add some additional labels, you could copy that drafting and reuse it for other devices in your model. The other new command we have there is the highlight device. This is mostly to just help you track down where things are, because it can be tricky finding it in your model and remembering where it was. So if you run highlight device in the drafting view, you can select the device here. It'll say I can't find it, but it will eventually go track it down. It'll find it for you and highlight it and say, hey, this is MDP3 in the model, so you can actually go make changes to it if you needed to. And now you know where it is. Same way, you could highlight the device, say, okay, I have this device. Is it on my one line? Yes, it is, and there it is. And so there you know where it is. So that way, if you're making changes to things, that way you can make sure that what is being pointed to is what you're thinking it is. And let's see, I already went over the one-line diagram family customization. So we adjusted our families. Mostly when you do an insert, you'll see that no longer does it have all of the existing options. It just has the plain option, and then to do the existing, you just check the box. on the family itself to change it to an existing line work. So those are the new features that we've implemented over the last couple months. It's always surprising how quickly you can show off what took months and months to program. But that is it for the new features. So are there any questions related to those features, to anything else in the beta, or anything related to the software?
Hey, David.
Yes.
So this is Farid from Strike Electric. So first of all, I'll thank you for those new features, which is really will be helpful, especially the highlight device, which is very good. So I have two questions. First, if you please update one of these panel circuit breaker or overcurrent protection device in the DEV, and then run calculate the whole project, see if it's updating, and same thing for the feeder tag. If we update it from edit, like change it to any different wire size, and by the time we run DEV, so let's see if it's updating, like getting the new tags.
Yeah, so when you update things, they should update on the one line. We actually cleaned that up quite a bit so that not only do they update when you run the calculate, they should update when you make the change to the device. Now, we actually did quite a bit of work kind of under the hood. So if I come here and I take this LP1, which is 200 amps, and I change that to a 150 amp panel, it's now going to have a 150 amp breaker, 150 amp wire. That should all update. And it got the breaker and the wire. I didn't get the call out. So those things should be updating automatically when you change them.
Yeah. And that's also updated in the feeder schedule as well, and on the little schedule onto the right. So,
yeah, so the feeder schedule updates. It will update when you run the calculate whole project, or if you insert it again, it'll basically update itself at that point. Just as you're going through modifying the devices, it won't automatically update. So it only does it when you either insert it or run the calculate. So if I come in here and, for example, change this to this is 125 amp, and actually I need to change my overcurrent protection because it's locked at 20. So now that's a 150 amp breaker or 125 amp. It doesn't update the schedule until we run calculate or schedule insert, and then it will add that to it.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And for the feeder IDs, for the sequencing of IDs, that is handled. It depends a little bit on what type of ID that you're using. We currently have for the feeder for the ID, we're using the short format. So if we go to customization, we have some commands here to look at the IDs. So we can go to the project schedule. Here are all the IDs that have been defined in this project. It sorts them by ampacity and then by the ID itself. So that will be how it sorts them. We're going to clear all those out. I'm going to change my option to long. And if we run calculate, that'll recreate IDs for everything using the long format. And again, it'll sort them based upon the ampacity and then the actual format text. And finally, we'll look at the sequential as the last option. And I need to change one more thing here. So if we go to, we have it set to import the IDs from the master schedule. They've already been created in the short format, so that's where it pulled them all. That's why nothing changed. So if I go to my master ID schedule, you can just see that these are all the schedules defined in our master, and these are going to be used in projects. So it's going to totally ignore because it's not creating new IDs when it uses these. It's just using the ones that are here. I'm going to go to my options and just turn that off to ignore the master completely. We won't copy to or from it. Delete everything and run the calculate again. So there's the format with a long format. It's got the ampacity, the number of wires, whether it has a neutral and a ground. And again, it's sorting them based upon ampacity and then the text of the ID final option is that we can change it to sequential. And so this will just number them. And since it is sequential, basically it needs to clear them, and it prompts you, do you want to clear the IDs? We'll go ahead and say yes. It's going to erase all the IDs, so there are now no IDs in our schedule. So that got cleared out automatically. We run calculate, and it's just going to number them for us, and then we can go see how it numbered them when we look at the ID schedule. So these are the feeder IDs it came up with. Well, the sorting here is not as good as I would have liked it. It should do a slightly better sort where the IDs match the ampacity. Need to review this. And then when you add additional, so basically you clear them all out and you run it and it'll give you the IDs in order. And then if new IDs are added in the project, they will actually be added out of order at that point. The idea being that if you do a release of a set of drawings, you have the feeder IDs out there, and then you make modifications, you don't want to be swapping the IDs, because then you have to do a revision cloud around every single ID because you just changed the number. You just put the new ones at the bottom with their numbers, and so it gets a little bit out of order as you release your sets. You can always clear them all out and have it regenerate them for you. But then, again, you have to mark them all as changed if you're changing your set.
Hey, David, this is Brian at ME3.
Hey, Brian.
Hi. Appreciate all the updates, and I know you guys spent lots of hours. We do a lot of messy renovation work, and right now one of the projects, I don't know if that's the one I sent to you, I'm doing a demolition one-line riser and then a new one. But one specific instance was I changed, the panel name stayed the same. So from the demo one line to the new one line, the name was the same, but I changed the panel. Instead of 100 amps, it was 225 or whatever the case is.
Okay.
I don't know how to, when I have two one lines in the same drawing and then I run the calculate whole project, it forces the demo to be the new panel.
What you'll want to do in that case is on the demo, basically the one that doesn't match the actual model, go into the demo and erase that label and put in just standard Revit text to label that size.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, and this is kind of a shortcoming of Revit, is that it doesn't really handle phasing, particularly of electrical equipment, very, very well. They attempt some phasing, and I think it probably works better on the architectural side, but electrical, it struggles. So just go into the existing and modify it to just label it manually.
Manual. Okay. All right. Okay. I figured there was a workaround, but I just didn't know what. Okay. So it's one of those Revit, unfortunate Revit things.
Yeah. We're limited a little bit what we can do. So just in the demo, just label it put the additional label on there.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And it turns out that this schedule here can't really be used as a feeder schedule. Revit just doesn't quite have all the things it needs to be able to generate a nice schedule for what you would want for a one line. So this is really more a list of all the feeders in your project, which is a helpful and interesting list, but it does not work as a feeder schedule for a one line. In particular, one thing it does struggle with is that you can only have one type of thing in here. And so if you have electrical equipment, you can't have all of the branch circuit devices, your mechanical equipment, your elevators. It's really hard to get them on the same schedule as your panels using a Revit schedule, because Revit sees them as very different, and they kind of are, but in terms of their feeders, they're the same. And so Revit's just like, I don't know what to do. So that's why we did our own feeder schedule.
Hey, David. Again, this is Freddie from Spec. So, is there any way, if we add spares or spaces in the panel schedule, and that will be linked and show in the single line?
We do not have any way to link to the spares and spaces. I'm trying to remember what we have. The problem that we have with that is if you go to a panel schedule and you come in here and you assign this as a space, or you assign it as a spare, it kind of gets this orangey thing. These orangey things are very, very different from the other things and how Revit is internally dealing with them. So we have not quite figured out how to crack the code to know that you've even got these in there. Revit is not very forthcoming on that. So if we put those in there, I'm pretty sure we can't see them at all. Verify that. So let's put in L1B, LP1B. We can run the circuit insert, select that, but yeah, see, we don't, yeah, that's what I thought. I just want to verify that. We don't even see it as a circuit because it doesn't really exist as a circuit in Revit in the way the others do because there's nothing downstream of it. So you can insert it basically as, you can just put it, use the insert circuit, put something in, and label it spare. And that's about the best that we can do.
Okay. So I have another question also. So suppose if we add like a motor coordination from mechanical or plumbing, like we add like a motor graphic wise, and then that has a MOCP or like a fuse size or switch size. So those tags are linked with the DME, like if we update it like 20 amps or 30 amps, and that will pop up in the signal line.
Yes, so you can put in equipment like an elevator or a mechanical equipment and have everything linked nicely. I can come here. We've got, this model has this cooling tower. We run insert link. We can select that. And then I'll put in my panel so it has something to connect to. And this is getting very messy. Don't draft your one lines like I am drafting. So it will put in the overcurrent protection and the breaker and everything else. And so then if we then go back to the model and make any changes here, if we set the breaker size in this thing, okay, that's actually locked at 200 amps. So we'll change it here in circuit edit. Change it to 100 amps or 110. And it will pick it up and change it.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Can branch circuit devices show fault on the one line? They should be able to. So we definitely can show fault for a panel. If you select the panel, you know, it's got all the fault values in there. If we select the device, it should, yeah, it has the corresponding fault values as well. So it has all the fault values. So you can do a label with those fault values as well on that device. Those also, do they show up on the circuits? And they also show up on the circuit as well. So pretty much everything has a fault that you can label. And then the follow-up question, how do you get those added? So you need those added as shared parameters. There's kind of a couple levels. If we come here to the actual model, it will have the value on the model. And so this is any shared parameter that's on the model that has a matching shared parameter in the one-line diagram will get transferred. So you need to make sure it's a shared parameter on the model. And so for Design Master stuff, we add our stuff. You can also do this with your shared parameters. So if you have another piece of information you want on the one line that you also want other places, add it as a shared parameter to the model, change it in the model, and then you can go to the one-line diagram, and anything that matches will get transferred. And those do need to be added to the family. So you need to select the family, run edit family, go to the shared the family types, get the shared parameter loaded here using all the Revit shared parameter stuff, get it in here, and then load that back into your one line. And then if the shared parameter names match, it will transfer for the data over. So by default, our families have a lot of the shared parameters. We did choose to, I say we chose to limit it. It's still like, I don't know, 30 or 40 parameters, but it's less than the 60 or 100 we could have put in there. So if there's a parameter that we have that you want to use, you can just add it. And if there's other parameters that you have, you can add them. And if they match, they will get transferred over. When using the software, if you go to the panel schedule and change the breaker size, that change does not get saved. You have to go to Circuit Edit. Is there a way to change that workflow? The answer to that is no. Unfortunately, with the way Revit works, we don't know if the number is different if you change that on purpose or not. And with the way we have our breaker sizes, there's various calculations happening there. So let's pull up our Circuit Edit. So for the breaker size, we don't actually even specify a size. We say size automatically. We say, Design Master, you figure this out for me. And then the software says, well, here's the size, this is how much load's on here, or we've got this, piece of equipment where I've set it in the piece of equipment, or it's got an MOCP size. And so it does all of that stuff and figures out the breaker size for you. So if you then come over here to the panel schedule and change it, the software doesn't know, well, did you change that because you mean it to? And then what happens if the load changes? Do you want to change it or not? There's no way to say, I'm changing this and I want to lock it at this value forever, or I think it should be, so it doesn't really have enough way to put enough intelligence in this view for us to know what is going to happen. So we do force you into the Circuit Edit to change that. And we demand that you come here, tell us through this interface, this is what I want the breaker size to be. It is different than the standard Revit workflow where you can go in here and change your breaker sizes. On the flip side, it also means that we know what you intend for that breaker size to be and can do the sizing automatically for you.
And David, this is Brian at ME3 again. Can you summarize the? I know one of the things I love about you guys is that the training materials are all very good. How are you going to post these with these updates, or do we need to refer back to these videos, the video archives, in case we forget something?
I very much appreciate that you say that we have good training now, because 3 or 4 years ago, that was not the case. But I hired a technical writer, and his job has been to get all the training taken care of, and he's done a really good job. So I very much appreciate that you can say that about the software now. And so the question is, okay, how do we get all this training stuff ready to go for the new release? So the user manual is up to date. He's been working on that as we go along. And he basically, getting all the training manuals to match the new release is a little bit tricky because we keep changing the new release. I mean, for example, just this morning, I added this new button. So anything he would have done prior wouldn't have had this button on it. So he has to retake a bunch of screenshots, redo videos and whatnot. So he's partly just like cooling his heels, waiting for us to stop making changes. And then he's going to go through and redo everything for us. So for right now, what we have available are these little trainings that we're doing on the beta software. These will still be available. He's been taking all these and posting them to the website. Old ones are available. This one will be available probably tomorrow, depending on how quickly he turns it around. Monday for sure. So those will be what's available, in the next couple months. Eventually, all of those will actually be scrubbed from the website because they're looking at beta software and be replaced with more official versions. So that'll be something that's kind of rolling out a little bit later relative to when the software is coming out. So I would think in that gap between June 1st when we're done and July 15th when we do our final version, he'll spend a lot of that time getting all the final stuff taken care of so that the tutorials and all the training videos are updated to match the new release.
So for now, it may be better to review these archived videos. Yeah,
so for now, what we have is the help is correct. So if you go to the help here, this will pull up stuff that's relevant to 2.0. And then on the website, if you go to our training, all of these videos are good. Let's see if I put this here. So on the website, under support, under online training, you scroll down to the bottom, all the training recordings. So if you go to Electrical for Revit, all of these, the most recent trainings, basically from the RT 2.0 features on up, all of this is relevant to the beta. So that's what we have available right now. That's kind of what we're pointing people toward. So those are the trainings, and that's all for the beta. and those eventually will be kind of cleaned up and made more official. All right, well, I'm not seeing any more questions, so I think we will wrap it up for the day. Beta 8 is available now. You guys have all been sending me projects. That's good. We definitely recommend send us a project, have us make sure that everything converts, mostly getting everything to work with the feeder IDs and whatnot. We kind of have to do a little bit of conversion on the one line. So we just want to make sure the first thing that happens when you install Beta 8 is it doesn't crash on you. It seems pretty stable. The last couple projects have all worked flawlessly, but I would recommend send us a project, have us test it real quick, and then you can install Beta 8. Thank you for watching today's Design Mastery training. Contact us with questions or comments by calling 866-516-9497 or emailing support@designmastery.biz.